I guess I should start by saying that I never thought I'd find myself in this situation. My name is David, and for the past few years I've been on this long, winding road of recovery from addiction. I was getting my life together piece by piece. I had a solid job, supportive friends, and I thought I had the perfect wife in Jessica. I mean, we had been married for 5 years and everything seemed fine, at least on the surface. But here's the thing. When you're in recovery, your senses become sharper. You notice things that you wouldn't have before. I began to pick up on subtle changes in Jessica that made me uneasy. She was spending more time on her phone, often texting late at night, and she'd started going out with friends without telling me who they were. At first, I chalked it up to her wanting to have a life outside of our marriage, which I encouraged. I thought, hey, she deserves to have fun, even if I'm busy trying to rebuild myself. But deep down, I had this nagging feeling that something was off. I remember one night, after I got home from a support group meeting, I found her phone lying on the kitchen counter. It was buzzing incessantly with notifications. Normally, I'd never even think about checking her phone. That's just not my style. But curiosity got the better of me. I grabbed it and unlocked it with the password I had memorized from when we had shared everything. Instantly, I felt a pit in my stomach. The screen was filled with messages from a guy named Mark. They were flirty, suggestive, and clearly beyond anything that could be considered innocent. I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. I didn't want to believe it, but the proof was right there in front of me. I started scrolling, and each message cut deeper than the last. They talked about meeting up, secret rendezvous, and even exchanged explicit pictures. I was furious, but also in a state of disbelief. Who was this Mark guy? And why was Jessica cheating on me while I was trying to fight my demons? The next day, I confronted her. My heart raced as I walked into the living room, the phone clutched tightly in my hand. Jessica, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, we need to talk. The look on her face was a mixture of surprise and annoyance, like I had interrupted her favorite show. She brushed her hair back and gave me the kind of smile that felt way too rehearsed. "What's up, David?" "Cut the crap," I said, holding up her phone. "I found these messages. Who the hell is Mark?" Her expression shifted instantly. The defensiveness kicked in and she tried to downplay everything. "Oh, it's just a guy from work. We joke around. You know how it is." I could hardly believe my ears. I pressed her for more details, but she kept insisting it was no big deal, that I was overreacting because of my recovery. Instead of feeling like the husband seeking the truth, I felt like the villain in my own life story. I was standing there, vulnerable and raw, and she was acting like I was the one with the problem. The gaslighting was strong, and I could feel the anger boiling inside me. I won't lie, the confrontation felt like a whirlwind of emotions. I was angry, hurt, and betrayed all at once. Jessica could see that I was struggling, and her response was just as hurtful as the discovery itself. It was like she was justifying her actions by pointing out my past mistakes. I stormed out, feeling the weight of the world on my shoulders. How could she do this to me, especially when I was trying to be better for both of us? That night, I sat alone in our bedroom, replaying the confrontation in my head. I felt like I was drowning in pain, questioning everything about our marriage. How had we gone from being a loving couple to this? I realized I was at a crossroads. I had to decide how to deal with the betrayal, and that decision was going to shape not just my future but my entire understanding of love and commitment. What was I going to do next? I had to figure it out. In the days that followed the confrontation, I was a walking shell of the person I had been. I felt like a ghost in my own home, moving from room to room without purpose. The thought of Jessica's betrayal echoed in my mind relentlessly. Each time I looked at her, I felt a mix of anger and confusion. I wanted to scream at her, to make her feel the pain she had inflicted on me, but I also wanted to understand how it had come to this. How could the woman I loved so deeply, who had supported me through my darkest days, turn around and do something so cruel? As the week dragged on, I started to notice more signs of her deceit. Jessica was still acting as if everything was normal, throwing herself into her routine, laughing a little too loudly at her phone, and leaving for errands at odd hours. I was convinced that she was still seeing Mark. Each time her phone buzzed, the sound felt like a knife twisting in my gut. I wanted to confront her again, but a part of me hesitated. What if she just lied again? What if the truth was something I wasn't ready to hear? One evening, I decided to do some sleuthing. I had never been the kind of guy to invade someone's privacy, but I felt like I had no choice. I couldn't let this go on any longer. After she left the house for an evening workout, I grabbed her phone, powered it on, and scanned through her texts again. I found conversations that were even more explicit than before. They talked about what they wanted to do together, things Jessica had never expressed interest in with me. I felt bile rise in my throat. I couldn't believe this was happening. My heart raced as I flipped through her photo gallery. I knew it was wrong, but desperation clouded my judgment. Pictures of her and Mark flooded my vision. They were smiling together, clearly enjoying each other's company. It made my skin crawl. How could she betray me like this? Didn't our vows mean anything to her? Then I stumbled across a video. It was short, only a few seconds long, but it felt like a punch to the gut. They were kissing intimately without a care in the world. I felt tears well up in my eyes. I slammed the phone down, my hands trembling. This was what my life had come to. I was so wrapped up in my recovery journey that I hadn't seen the cracks forming in our relationship. I thought we were building a new life together, but she was tearing it down behind my back. When Jessica returned home, I confronted her again, this time with evidence in hand. I threw the phone on the table between us, my chest heaving with rage. "You think this is a joke? Is this what you call love?" To my surprise, she didn't back down. Instead, she laughed, a cold, bitter laugh that rattled me. "David, you're being dramatic. You know relationships get messy sometimes. It doesn't mean I don't love you." "Love?" I shouted, disbelief dripping from my words. "This is love to you?" Sneaking around and lying to my face. "You've been spending time with him while I'm trying to get my life back on track." I watched as she shifted uncomfortably, trying to maintain her composure. "I was lonely. You were so wrapped up in your recovery that I felt abandoned. I never thought it was that serious with Mark. It was just a fling." A fling, those words cut deeper than any knife. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Just a fling," I echoed, incredulity rising in my voice. "You were sending him pictures, Jess. You were planning to meet up with him. How can you say it's just a fling?" She didn't answer right away. Her silence spoke volumes. It was clear to me that she hadn't thought this through. I could see the realization dawning in her eyes. She had crossed a line, and there was no way to sugarcoat it. After that confrontation, I felt an odd sense of clarity. I had been consumed by heartbreak and anger, but now I could see that this wasn't just about her betrayal. It was about me finding my own strength. I was no longer going to be the victim in this story. I started to think about my options and what I truly wanted moving forward. I could either let her deceit tear me down completely or rise up and reclaim my life. It was time to take back my power. I wasn't going to let her define my worth. I decided then and there that I would focus on my recovery and not let this relationship dictate my self-esteem. The road ahead was going to be difficult. I knew that much. But I also realized that this was a turning point for me, not just in dealing with Jessica, but in reclaiming my identity as a person worthy of respect and love. I had to find a way to move forward, and that meant confronting the painful truths about my marriage. And so, with a heavy heart but a clear mind, I began to plan my next steps. The days turned into a blur as I tried to navigate the emotional aftermath of my discovery. I threw myself into my recovery with renewed intensity, attending every support group meeting I could find. It felt like a lifeline, a way to regain some control over my life when everything else seemed to be spiraling. My sponsor, Mike, noticed that something was bothering me and urged me to talk about it. It was one of those moments where I had to decide whether to share my deepest wound or keep it buried. Eventually, I chose honesty. I sat across from him in a small, dimly lit cafe, the smell of burnt coffee lingering in the air. "I found out my wife is cheating on me," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. The words felt heavy, like they were dragging me down. Mike leaned in, his expression serious. "I'm really sorry to hear that, David. Do you want to talk about it?" As I recounted everything, The gradual changes in Jessica's behavior, the confrontation, and the painful evidence I had uncovered. I felt a strange mixture of relief and vulnerability. It was cathartic to share my pain, and Mike listened intently, offering words of encouragement. "You're not alone in this. You have every right to feel hurt and angry. Just remember, this is about your healing journey now." After that conversation, I felt a shift. I realized that I couldn't let Jessica's betrayal define me. I needed to focus on rebuilding myself, emotionally, physically, and spiritually. I started going to the gym again, taking long runs through the park, and even dabbling in meditation. I was determined to become the best version of myself, not just for me but for anyone who came into my life next. Meanwhile, Jessica continued to act like nothing was wrong, but each passing day felt like a dull ache in my chest. I was living in the same house, sharing the same space, but we were miles apart emotionally. It was suffocating. I often caught her texting Mark when she thought I wasn't looking, and every time I saw that smug smile on her face, it ignited a fire inside me. I wanted to confront her again, but I also knew I had to approach it differently this time. I had to be strategic. One night while she was out grocery shopping, I decided to dig deeper. I flipped through her social media accounts, hoping to find more evidence. It felt invasive, but I was desperate for closure. I came across a photo she had posted with Mark at a local bar, their faces too close, too comfortable. Caption read, "Cheers to new friends." I felt my stomach turn. It was like a slap in the face, a reminder that she was continuing her betrayal without a second thought. When she returned home, I confronted her with the photo. "So this is what new friends look like." I held the phone up, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. She looked taken aback, and for a moment I thought she might actually feel remorse. "David, you don't understand. It's not what it looks like." "Then what is it?" I shot back, frustration boiling over. "You invited him into our lives while I was trying to heal. How can you look me in the eye and say it's not what it seems?" Her reactions were defensive, circling back to the tired excuse of loneliness. "You were so consumed by your recovery that I felt neglected. I didn't think you'd care." That was the moment it hit me like a freight train. She wasn't even trying to take responsibility for her choices. It was all about her feelings, her needs, and her excuses. I could no longer tolerate this cycle of blame. "You know what? I'm done with this. You've made your choices, and now I have to make mine." The look on her face was a mixture of shock and annoyance, as if I were the one who had wronged her. It was infuriating. I realized then that I had been holding on to this idea of us, this fantasy of a perfect marriage that no longer existed. I had given her so many chances to be honest, and she had squandered every single one. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of my decision settle onto my shoulders. "I'm going to move out, Jessica. I need space to think about what I want and where I'm headed. I can't do this anymore." The words spilled out with a clarity I hadn't felt before. The relief that followed was overwhelming. I felt lighter, as if I had finally shed a heavy burden. "I can't believe you walk away from our marriage just like that," she said, her tone incredulous. "You're just throwing everything away." "No, I'm reclaiming my life," I replied firmly. "You chose this path, and now you have to deal with the consequences." That night I packed a few essentials and made arrangements to stay with a friend. I felt a mix of emotions swirling around in me: fear, sadness, but most of all, a newfound sense of freedom. I was finally taking control of my life, no longer letting Jessica's choices dictate my happiness. It was terrifying, but it was also exhilarating. As I lay in bed at my friend's place that night, I reflected on the journey ahead. I had no idea what the future held, but I was ready to face it head on. I was determined to heal from this betrayal, to learn from it, and to grow stronger. It was time to forge a new path, one that was all my own. The first few days at my friend's place were a whirlwind of emotions. I felt like I was in a fog, shifting from anger to relief, sadness to determination. My friend Jake tried to help me stay distracted. We went out for drinks, hit the gym, and even went hiking on the weekends. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't escape the reality of what had happened. I could still see Jessica's face, hear her voice. Each reminder acted like a trigger, pulling me back to that painful moment when I discovered her betrayal. One evening, while sitting on Jake's couch, I felt an overwhelming urge to talk about my experience. So I opened up to him about everything, the infidelity, the confrontation, and my decision to leave. "It's just so messed up," I said, shaking my head. "I thought we were a team, you know. That we were stronger together, especially after everything I've gone through." Jake nodded, his expression serious. "You were vulnerable and she took advantage of that. You deserve better, David. You're doing the right thing by prioritizing yourself." His words resonated with me. For so long I had put Jessica's needs before my own, and now I was starting to see how toxic that had been for both of us. But the nights were the hardest. I would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, haunted by memories of our life together. I missed the good moments, the laughter, the late-night talks, the intimacy we had shared. It felt like I was mourning a relationship that had been beautiful before it turned sour. I started to understand that the relationship I was grieving was a mirage, a version of Jessica that never truly existed. As the days turned into weeks, I began to realize how much I had been holding back during my recovery. I had focused so much on becoming a better person and healing from my addiction that I had neglected to truly evaluate my relationship. I needed to confront those feelings head-on. That's when I decided to channel my pain into something constructive. I enrolled in a counseling course. The decision felt empowering. I wanted to understand both sides of emotional turmoil, what it felt like to heal and what it meant to betray someone. I was determined to use my experience to help others, to become a counselor who could empathize with those facing similar struggles. The thought of being able to guide someone else through their darkness gave me hope. I realized that my pain could serve a purpose, that I could turn this heartache into a catalyst for change. The first day of class was nerve-wracking. I walked into the room, my heart racing, but as I sat down and listened to the instructor, I felt a sense of belonging wash over me. The discussions we had about relationships, trust, and healing resonated deeply. I could feel the gears in my mind turning as I absorbed everything, taking notes and reflecting on my own experiences. I was surrounded by others who were passionate about helping people, and it felt exhilarating to be a part of something larger than myself. Over the next few weeks, I threw myself into my studies. I learned about different therapeutic approaches, how to communicate effectively, and most importantly, how to create a safe space for those in need. I started applying these skills to my own life, reaching out to others in my support group and sharing my story. The more I spoke about my challenges, the more I began to heal. One day, during a particularly intense class discussion about betrayal, I felt the urge to share my experience. I hesitated at first, but then I raised my hand. "I recently went through a situation where my spouse cheated on me," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "I'm still processing the hurt, but I've realized that I need to focus on my journey and what that means for my future." The room fell silent, and then someone spoke up. "Thank you for sharing that, David. It takes a lot of courage to open up, especially about something so painful." The validation felt good. I was no longer alone in my struggle. I was part of a community where vulnerability was not only accepted but welcomed. As I continued to engage with my classmates and professors, I started to notice a shift in my perception of the situation. I began to see Jessica not just as the woman who betrayed me, but as someone who had her own struggles and insecurities. It didn't excuse her actions, but it helped me understand that we were both flawed individuals trying to navigate a complicated world. This newfound perspective allowed me to finally let go of the anger I had been holding onto so tightly. I learned that bitterness only served to weigh me down, and in order to move forward, I needed to forgive, not for her sake, but for my own. Forgiveness became a way to release myself from the shackles of my past, to reclaim my peace of mind. I started to see my life as an open book, filled with blank pages waiting to be written. I could choose how to fill those pages, whether with anger or healing, with despair or hope. The decision was mine. Yet, even as I immersed myself in this new chapter, part of me still struggled with the idea of confronting Jessica again. I knew that there were unresolved feelings lurking beneath the surface. The thought of seeing her again struck fear in my heart, but I also knew that I needed closure, a final conversation that would allow me to fully move on. Would I be able to look her in the eye and let go of the pain she caused? That was the question that haunted me as I prepared for the next step in my journey. After weeks of inner turmoil, I finally mustered the courage to reach out to Jessica. I hadn't spoken to her since I moved out, and while I had been focused on my studies and self-improvement, the unresolved feelings between us still lingered like a stubborn shadow. I decided that I needed to have one last conversation to confront her and express how I felt, but also to reclaim the final pieces of my emotional health. I sent her a text, asking if we could meet. To my surprise, she responded almost immediately, agreeing to meet at a cafe we used to frequent, a place filled with memories, both good and bad. As the date approached, my heart raced with a mix of anxiety and anticipation. Would she try to manipulate me again? Would she show any remorse? Or would it just be more of the same gaslighting? When I walked into the cafe, I spotted her sitting at a corner table, nervously tapping her fingers on the wood. She looked different, more subdued, as if the weight of her choices had finally caught up with her. I approached her slowly, my heart pounding. "Hey," I said, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. "Hi, David," she replied, her voice small. There was an awkward silence as we both searched for words that didn't come easily. Finally, I decided to break the ice. "I've been doing a lot of thinking since we last spoke." "Me too," she said, looking down at her coffee. "I didn't realize how much I took for granted until you were gone." Her admission struck me. Was she genuinely reflecting on her actions, or was this just another attempt to pull at my heartstrings? I took a deep breath, trying to center myself. "I found out about the messages and the photos, Jess. It hurt. It hurt more than anything I've ever experienced." "I know," she said, her eyes finally meeting mine. "And I'm sorry for what I did. I was selfish and immature. I let my insecurities get the better of me. I never should have cheated on you." I could see the sincerity in her eyes, but I also felt a twinge of skepticism. I had heard apologies before, and they often felt hollow. "You say that now, but I need to know why. It happened. What drove you to betray our marriage?" She paused, taking a moment to gather her thoughts. "When you were consumed by your recovery, I felt abandoned. I didn't know how to cope. I thought I'd find comfort elsewhere. It was a terrible decision, and I regret it every day." Her words hung in the air between us, heavy with unspoken emotions. "But that's the problem, right? You didn't just talk to me about how you felt. Instead, you sought comfort from someone else. You made that choice, and it shattered everything we built together." "I know," she replied, tears welling in her eyes. "I'm not asking for your forgiveness right now. I just want you to know I see my mistakes. I hope you can find a way to heal." Hearing her acknowledge her wrongdoing felt like a step forward, but it also made me realize how much I had changed since the discovery of her infidelity. I had spent so much time focusing on my recovery and transforming my life, yet here I was, still grappling with the emotional fallout of our relationship. I realized that this conversation wasn't just about her seeking forgiveness, it was also about me reclaiming my narrative. "Jessica," I said, my voice steady, "I don't know if I can forgive you right now. And honestly, I'm not sure I want to go back to how things were. I'm healing, and my priority is to continue on that path." She nodded, the weight of my words settling in. "I understand. You need to do what's best for you. I just wanted to be honest about how I feel." I took a deep breath, feeling a mixture of sadness and relief. This moment was my closure, and it felt liberating to express my truth. "I appreciate your honesty, but I need to focus on myself right now. I have new goals, new aspirations, and they don't include a future with you." Jessica looked down, her expression pained. "I know I messed up, but I genuinely wish you the best. You deserve happiness, David." As we talked, I felt a sense of catharsis wash over me. This was the final chapter in our story, a chance for both of us to move on without the weight of the past holding us back. I was no longer the broken man she had betrayed. I was evolving into someone stronger, someone who recognized their worth. When the conversation finally came to a close, I stood up to leave. "Take care of yourself, Jessica. I hope you find what you're looking for." As I walked away, I felt lighter than I had in months. That conversation was a pivotal moment, a moment that signified my growth and acceptance of the past. I had faced my fears, confronted my pain, and emerged on the other side with clarity. That night I reflected on the journey I had taken. I wasn't just recovering from addiction, I was recovering from a toxic relationship. I had learned the value of self-worth and the importance of setting boundaries. I wasn't just a victim of betrayal, I was a survivor, and I was ready to embrace the future that lay ahead. No longer anchored to the past, I felt empowered to keep moving forward. I had a life to build, goals to chase, and people to help. The chapters ahead were blank, waiting for me to fill them with new experiences and meaningful connections. I was ready for whatever came next, and for the first time in a long time, I felt excited about the possibilities that awaited me. As I moved into the following weeks, a sense of freedom enveloped me. The heaviness that had once weighed me down began to dissipate, and I started to embrace life with renewed vigor. I channeled the pain I had experienced into my studies, diving headfirst into my counseling program. Each lecture, each discussion, felt like a step toward not just my healing, but also toward helping others navigate their own struggles. I found myself drawn to stories of resilience and redemption, learning about the complexities of human relationships and the frailties that come with them. It became clear that my experiences, both the addiction and the betrayal, had equipped me with a unique perspective. I was learning to empathize deeply with others, understanding that everyone carries their burdens, often hidden beneath the surface. One day, during a session on relationship dynamics, our professor encouraged us to reflect on our own experiences and how they shaped our understanding of love and trust. I shared my story with my classmates, recounting the journey of discovery and heartbreak I had faced. I spoke about the feelings of betrayal and anger, but also the clarity and strength I had gained from the experience. The response was overwhelmingly supportive. Many of my peers expressed admiration for my courage in sharing such a personal story, and it reinforced my desire to continue on this path. As I continued my studies, I started volunteering at a local support group for individuals dealing with addiction and relationship issues. It was enlightening to hear others' stories and to witness their struggles and triumphs. I found a sense of purpose in helping others navigate their pain, guiding them through their healing process. It was a role I embraced wholeheartedly, as it reminded me of the support I had received during my own darkest days. Eventually, I decided to take a break from my studies to focus on my personal life as well. I started exploring new hobbies, painting, hiking, and even taking cooking classes. Each new experience felt like a celebration of my newfound freedom. I surrounded myself with friends who uplifted me and offered genuine support. It was a stark contrast to the isolation I had felt during my marriage. One evening, while at a gallery opening, I bumped into a woman named Sarah. We struck up a conversation about the art on display, and there was an undeniable connection between us. She listened intently as I shared my thoughts, laughing at my jokes and engaging in a way I hadn't experienced in a long time. It felt refreshing, and I realized how much I had missed genuine companionship. As we exchanged numbers, I felt a spark of hope. Perhaps I was ready to open myself up to love again. But this time, I approached it with caution and awareness. I knew I had to build a solid foundation based on trust and communication. I wasn't the same person I had been before Jessica, and I wasn't going to let my past dictate my future. Months passed, and as I pursued both my studies and my budding relationship with Sarah, I felt more grounded than I had in years. My past experiences no longer haunted me. Instead, they served as lessons that shaped my character. I learned to appreciate the small joys in life, from a quiet evening spent painting to exhilarating hikes in nature. Then, one day, I received a message from Jessica. It was unexpected and my heart raced. She wanted to meet, to talk about things. My initial reaction was a mix of apprehension and curiosity. Did she want to try and rekindle the past, or was she seeking closure for herself? Despite my reservations, I agreed to meet her one last time. When we met, the atmosphere was tense yet strangely calm. As I sat across from her, I could see the changes in her demeanor. She looked more introspective than I remembered. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," she began, her voice steady. About everything that happened between us. I listened as she spoke, surprised to hear her take responsibility for her actions. I realize now that I hurt you deeply. I was selfish, and I never considered how my choices would impact you. I understand if you can't forgive me, but I wanted to let you know that I'm working on myself. I appreciated her honesty, and it reminded me just how far I had come. I had spent so long carrying the weight of her betrayal, but now it felt lighter. Jessica, I've learned a lot since we last spoke. I'm focused on my recovery and my future. I can't change what happened, but I'm ready to let go of the anger. For the first time, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. This conversation was the closure I needed, a final chapter that allowed me to move forward without the burden of resentment. We parted ways amicably, and I felt a weight lifted from my shoulders. As I walked away, I reflected on how far I had come. I had transformed my pain into purpose, finding strength in vulnerability and hope in adversity. I had learned that healing is a journey, one that requires courage, self-reflection, and the willingness to embrace change. In that moment, I felt ready to step into the next chapter of my life. I had reclaimed my identity, and I was excited about the future that awaited me. I was no longer defined by my past. Instead, I was a survivor, a warrior, and a counselor in the making. And with each new day, I was determined to create a life filled with love, understanding, and authentic connections.